Hello, hello. Hello. So, humans and the dimensions, right? What dimensions? What are they? All the different aspects of the different ways you can think about yourself. The higher self, the lower self, the future self, the past self, who you were when you were a kid and you were starting out your meditations, being guided by a version of yourself that actually wants to reach back into the past and help you, right? These are the kinds of things that you can do all throughout your period of development as you create your path of practice. So I remember when I was younger that in my bedroom in high school there was the mirror sliding glass doors, right? So I set up my little ring of candles and I would meditate with my hand on the glass. And I'm like, okay, if magic and the soul and all of these things are connected, then how can I connect to the part of me that knows the magic that I don't know now, right? And so that's how I started on this. I started on coming up with ways to summon power from my future self. The version of me that would always have magic and that would always be made of the energies that are part of the world that we make up. So we begin with the state of darkness, right? When you close your eyes and you just see nothing but the blackness of no light coming in, right? So you have that. That's your starting place. Then you have your life, which is your awareness within that blackness. Then you have this world that you can still feel with your hands, your body, and such like that. Then it moves into the death. Okay, now you have your spirit, you existing regardless of the body that you're in, regardless of the life that you are currently living. And that allows you to tap into the underworld, or in this case, the other world, in the mirror dimensions or in the future places, right? And that gives you the means by which you can work with your spirit. It allows you to create the gates of projection so that you can go into the mirror plane. And if you ever face two mirrors together, that creates an infinite corridor, right? Because each mirror creates a gateway, and through that gateway you can send your consciousness. So as you go through those and as you work with it, you look for the different aspects of the world that you want to enter into based on which path of the mirror, which door in the mirror you're going through. Are you going 5 in to the right? Are you going 15 in to the left? Like, it just depends on what it is you want to do. And so as you go through this, and as you go and you figure out, okay, well, what does the reflection of that world look like? If I'm going into a world where the divine has not divided itself, so this is going to be one of the Klipothic spheres, and I'm going to go look for everything that is to do with vampirism, right? I'm going to look for all of the methods by which it becomes non-viable for sustaining life, and I'm going to figure out how does it become viable for sustaining life? How does those techniques go towards extension of life or go towards the application of sorcery or magic without being a cause of corruption, without being something dark and twisted, right? The same way if I would go to look for power, right? Or if I would look for the way of the elemental world and its connections, what would it be? What does that look like, right? How do I get there? Using a scrying bowl, using a mirror, you can do this. And so creating the gateways of power allows you to do that. And I'll get into the different gates in another section. But going through all of the different opportunities for what is to be studied, what can be studied, right? So you have the mind's eye, which can see and imagine. It can do the questions of, I wonder what would happen if, I wonder what would happen as if, then if, right? So that the dualities of expression show that the flow between the various states and the relationship of those primal forces gives you a means to study the interaction between those conditions, as the fixed anchors can handle the flow of energy. So when you're using the alchemical anchoring mediums and you're working with those in order to stabilize the current of magic that you're working on, you can open up a space temporarily between the life and the death state of something, so that way when you go to work on it, you're minutely selecting those particular energies through which you can make some conjurations occur. so that you can have the light aspect of the spirit or the dark aspect of the spirit, or you can have the light aspect of the time or the dark aspect of the mind, and you can have life in its light or dark state depending on what it is you're doing. And so as you do that, the more overlap you have, those are going to be the overlays in your period. If you're building out an array, that would be the overlapping circles of the wheel of life, right? You have different spheres that are coming together to stack up to create the pattern of sacred geometry. So it becomes energy overlays. The world over here overlapping with this world over here creates those flowers of life, those worlds through which you can create gateways and open up into. So as you move through the higher and the lower states of each place, you can divide out what is the heaven state, what is the hell state, what is, if it is in perfect unity and it is perfectly balanced and it is perfectly aligned and attuned, you have the means by which you can conjure its heaven. Whereas if you have the hell state, whereas that heaven state has become too corrupted because the divine never divided itself out to let you experience that state without it, right? And so by not being there, by not having that state where the divine is, it allows for the individual to have free will, but it also generates corruption. And then it goes into the dark aspects of if it only is like this, if there is nothing else other than everything taken to extremes. So heaven can quite literally become hell depending on the extremes of your understanding. So that when you conjure up the firmaments, you conjure the land itself to hold the energy, you open the gateway, and the circle becomes the portal through which that gateway energy is anchored onto this world. This is why when you're using like sacred dirts and things like that, if you mix them into the powder and the array for your circles or your boundary spheres and things like that, what you can do is for the location on which your spell occurs, taps into the genus Loki, the animated consciousness of the land and all the things on that land, like the great spirit for the local region, right? So all the minerals, all the trees, all the small animals, all the birds, all the plants, all the people that live and die in that small location, that's the representative of the genus Loki. In certain traditions, they call it a wight, right? W-H-I-G-H-T. Or W-I-G-H-T, right? So when you're interacting with the wight, the land spirit, it's the thing that connects to the center of the earth. Through it, you can tap into the ley lines, you can tap into the nexus points, you can tap into the terrestrial powers. But when you start adding in different kinds of dirt into creating your holy spaces, to creating those barriers between this plane and the other world, then what you're able to do is you're able to change the land. So when you make a conjuration of Aretz, the dry earth of one of the hells, the land for your space inside your barrier candles becomes Azaretz. So when you are summoning down the energies from the demons of that sphere, they have a land in which they can exist temporarily. So you're creating a space for those energies to come where they won't be corrupted, right? This is why you create a summoning circle, is because it's basically like creating a airlock between this plane and the other, right? So while your words and your vibrations and everything and your consciousness can be shared across that boundary, the stuff inside the boundary doesn't become corrupted by the world that is. So you change the world in small form so that way change the world in small form so that way your interaction with the consciousness when you're creating evocations allows you to create that space between here and there, so that way you don't have to worry about it going screwy on you. Otherwise, you have to make concessions for the world, and that takes a lot more energy. That requires you to have to build a puppet, or that requires you to have a medium as a proxy, like somebody who's standing there mounting the spirit for you, or you have to call it into your consciousness, which can be dangerous if you don't have the means to separate your consciousness between that entity and yourself. So as you go through these things and you consider the words of power, when one speaks to command the heavens, the earth, and all below, then this is the means by which the work is based, when spoken from the soul. A word has the ability to draw out the emotions from the intended, and thereby affect the reality in accordance with the will of the speaker. Words are formed from the sounds emanating as the pronunciable syllables by the throat and its motions to express the inner will to the outer worlds. All words being names for the nature of things, specific tasks, and the states of being, and the variations of such music, words, chanting, and such stem from the flesh merging with the soul and the breath of life, the will made flesh and the spirit made manifest when they are brought together in combination. They do more than become a form of thought, but an expression of the true nature of the speaker, calling out to the essence of the thing being spoken to and creating within it a response to the thing by which was uttered, and then demonstrating the law of cause and effort, or cause and effect, right? So the words of power based on the syllables spoken to the spirit that affect the thing when the root of the word is spoken aloud allows the word spoken to come into the mind, and that bridges the physical and mental planes to affect the full essence of the thing being spoken to them aloud, which causes a greater effect than what's desired. So that essentially means that the reason why I do stuff with sales training and the reason why I do stuff with business training, right, and creating from those opportunities for people is because through those applications of controlling your words and getting your words to cause specific interactions with people, you can start studying the effect of what happens when you start doing those in ritual processes, when you start dealing with the intangible spirits. So while you speak life into somebody's business, giving them the means or giving them the power or giving them the transformation or giving them the connective thought, you have at your disposal the resources available to being able to push them further, move them deeper, right? So that as we create our communities, as we create our businesses, you have the tripart division of what happens. You've got the religious community, you've got the professional community, and you've got the care facilities, right? So that you've got something that can handle all three states of your being, right? Your physical body can be taken care of, your professional application of your purpose can be walked out, and your spiritual truths can be pursued, right? So this is why that kind of study is super important. So that way, you know, you're still following through with understanding that the law of incarnation is that no spirit shall enter this world without taking on the form of one born of this world, or be it animal or human. So any spirit or force that originates off this world, choosing to enter this world, may do so by the following means as it incarnates into mortal flesh, right? So like if you're dealing with a spirit pact and you want to deal with something that's inside you, or that you feel drawn to bringing into this world, what it is you're doing and how it is you're doing it can allow for a bloodline transmission, a like-to-like energy connection, right? Your DNA and its energy become entwined. It becomes as if it was one. So that way, if you have kids, if you have the generations of grandchildren and things like that, when you start dealing with spirits, it becomes lineage magic. They become the patron guardians of the ancestral line that you're creating. So that as you work with those spirits, or as you work with those energy forces that are bigger or deeper than yourself, you're connecting them to your family line by working with them. You're connecting them to the people that can eventually give birth to those spirits, so that when you are creating connection to the phantasmagoria, those intangible spirits that have no body, that have never been a body, they could eventually have one as you go through the process, as you work with those spirits, so that those can incarnate into flesh and have a chance to live on this planet, or on any planet that's habitable when the human species gets there, right? So once we get to be a traveling species, then it'll just depend on which planet they want to have an affinity towards. Then that particular soul's migration patterns change up, because you don't have to be limited to just to one Earth. You can be born into any myriad of the Earths that exists. It's just the way that the soul travels, the way that your spirit interacts, and like-to-like frequencies. So there's a reason why you would conjure up those spirits, is because those are already connected to you in some future state. Those are already future incarnations or future attachments to your lineage that you're recalling now through time. It's the disembodied form while those beings sleep and dream in the future you are interacting with the dreaming mind of future children, right? Or you are the future child of something that came before, right? So that there is a constant loop going from the past to the future, and that we as humans are the intermediaries of that in our time of life. During the period when we have our life, we have our birth and we have our death, and that string in between. So that as we are working with these kinds of energies, as we're working with these kinds of thoughts and making the summons of these sorts of energies, we know that we are connected to them, and we have to figure out, okay, what does this connection mean? What is our place within that connection of the discussion that's happening? How am I connected to that patron? How am I service of that spirit? And through that means of attachment, how do I ensure that through my actions that the spirit that walks with me, or that the spirits that I'm working with, have the best future ahead of them? That means doing the thing that requires this world to change, and change for the better, so that when they come into flesh, or when they are incarnated, or when they are expressed as the living bodies, they are not in a world of destruction. They are not in a world of darkness, but a world of light. They're not in a world of corruption, but in a world of peace. So it's going through these different stages, going through these different steps, that when you're conjuring up these kinds of spirits, you know exactly what you're doing, because everything else falls under congruency. So that you're teaching, your business models are the same as your emotional models, as you're the same as your spiritual models, as you're the same as your, all of the different congruencies, right? They all overlap, and through that overlapping, you create the gate of the way. And so as you prepare your spells in a higher order of things, the creation of the gate of the way allows you to open up your consciousness to the line of time when you were first created, to the when you were end created, when there is nothing left in creation other than your will in those dimensional states, right? Because again, we're taking presuppositions. The presupposition is that we're attached to unity, that we are attached to the created aspect of the world, and as such, we are in our time of life an emanation of the divine. And so by that understanding, we have a finite period of interaction with the world in order to be able to change it and produce within it the effect of the divine as it expresses itself through us. And the more impact that we have on people's lives, the better we can make it, the more pure that we can produce for people, the better off we're going to be when it comes to the application of whatever it is our thing is to do. So as we create words of power, as we speak spells of power, as we do professional business, as we do sales training, as we do sales technique, as we do customer service, as we do all of the things that I'm talking about, right? All of it is a congruent operation between our soul, its flesh, and the application of the future of whatever it is that we're going to come in contact with. So that way there is a congruent flow, and you can separate out anything that is not part of your flow, your unity, your being, and understand that it is an intrusive consciousness. It is something that is not in your own mind that you're working with, so therefore you can interact with it safely because you know where you start and you stop. So that way if you have to put your consciousness into a scrying bowl or into one of the black mirrors or into any of the gates that I'll be discussing in a future video, that you have that means of interaction and application so that you can safely say, I know where I stand, and I know where that thing stands, and I know that eventually that thing is going to need to have a body of its own. And so how do I give it the body that's best? How do I create for it the best conditions under which it can be operational, right? Because if you figure that it's all programming of the universe and of the celestial spheres, everything exists for a reason, and every interaction exists for a reason. And the fact that we seek out spellcraft as a means by which to augment that relationship, to pull those curtains back and see what's behind the fuzzy edges of reality, in order to engender that we are creators and we can create accordingly, right? It's our intent to create. Our intent to create for others and serve others. And so we start with magic. We start with the intangible energies, and then we work backwards into the tangible energies with business. How does my business serve? Is it the same kind of thing that my magic serves? Is it the same power that flows through? So as we connect to the divine, what we do and how we do it allows for us to engender that transformation that we seek in others. So, questions, right? some of these things are very esoteric, meaning that they're not for everybody to understand. And that's okay. It doesn't require everybody to understand. It requires those who are interacting with the spirits and making interactions with them on purpose, that they can themselves serve the community. They can themselves serve the intangible communities, so that the living and the dead can all have a path of function. The dead can rest, their spirit comes back. As soon as the body dies, there is a new body that spirit incarnates into, because energy can't be created or destroyed. It can just shift form. So what is the form that it shifts into? When your life is lived, your candle goes out, a new candle is lit, and your spirit transfers into that, right? It's the way that it goes. That's just how it is. It might not be human life. It could be animal life. It could be a fish. It could be a bird. It could be a bear. It could be a trout in a stream somewhere, and you end up on somebody's dinner table, because that's the path that your spirit walked. You went into the fishes. You went into the foxes. You went into the earth, right? And by doing that, and by going through and living your life in those different states, you can fill in the gaps that your spirit didn't have in this life. So if you're going through and you're doing the shamanic inversion, where you are relinquishing your flesh for a temporary period and entering into the spirit body of another animal, living for a time as if you were a deer, a bear, a moose, a sloth, a fox, whatever it is, right? And you're going and you're projecting into those states, you're learning the ways that those spirits interact peacefully with the environment around them, what conditions they're subject to, what fears they have, what hopes they have, what purpose they have in relation to the balance of nature. Like the beavers help create the streams, which help dam the fishes, so that there's a breeding ground safely for fishes, or that there's no floodplains. Like everything in nature is built upon a sustainability thing, right? Nature perpetuates itself in the best possible way, so that all things within nature can survive. It's the human body and the human action where we don't work on nature the same way. We interact on nature, we don't work with nature. So as we create and as we are creating, we have to be very careful that what we do interacts with nature in a positive way. So this is why I say we have to aim at congruency, because if we try to start doing stuff that's outside of our behavior patterns, then we're running a dangerous course. Quite simply, you're risking the path of corruption. Because what you need to do, why you need to do it, how you do it, who you serve, how they're served, and what they do with the things that you're serving them on, all of those things matter. At the end of the day, all of that stuff really does matter, because it's all interconnected. We are all going to live and die by our communal actions. And if you're watching the news, then yesterday, Vancouver Island, or the city of Vancouver up in Canada, all the roads leading into it got washed away because of floods. There is no land way to get into that city right now, because of the damage of the ecosystem. And this is just the beginning, and it's going to get so much worse. And so working with the spirits of the land, balancing the spirits of the land, feeding the spirits of the land, digging the hole, putting the fruit in, putting the vegetables in, putting an offering in there, covering it back up, so that the land can have back some of the energy that we take from it, that we have an intentional gift back to it, right? So that new orders of life can grow, so that new fertility can come about. Because otherwise we just take and take and take, and there's no reciprocal bond between us and the world that we live on. And that becomes corruptive, and that becomes unstable, and that becomes finite, instead of the infinite nature, which constantly seeks to produce life. And if humans weren't on this planet, would have continued to sustain life. Animals would go through their various cycles, and they would grow, and they would live, and they would die, and they would just be animals, right? Never needing to go inside, never needing to mine, never needing to go outside of their path, right? The fish will always do the things a fish will do. The bear will always do the things a bear will do. The stags and the deer will always do what they do, right? They don't need humans for that. Nature does that. They're able to do that in nature. When we bring energies into this planet, we are doing things that nature would otherwise do, but we're doing it through our effect. We're doing it because of our connection to those spirits, our future or past entrainment of that energy that we're looking to reconcile in some form, so that as we work with the past or as we work with the future, that line of connection between us and those spirits and that soul and your soul is not something that's to be disregarded as evil. It's not something to be disregarded as fearful. It's not something to be denied. It's something to be embraced and worked with and cultivated. Because if you can cultivate a relationship with it, if you can gain understanding from it, you don't have fear of it. You don't have to worry that it's going to do you wrong, because you understand that it is you. You wouldn't screw yourself. You're just trying to help yourself from a future state in time where you had already started out on those processes. You have already worked with the spirit that already passed from one life into the other, or it's in between life. And so you're calling back the spirit of yourself that was on your deathbed, so that way it can be your holy guide, right? Because it knows your path of life. And so by it knowing your path of life, it can guide you on a better form of life, so that way by the time that you're done with life, that spirit no longer exists in the way that it was, and you have a new spirit. And so you create yourself anew. Therefore, that one fades away. That one no longer is necessary. That one dissipates, and this new one comes about. And so as you go through and as you're changing out your perspectives, there's different ways that you can do it. And for that, I'll do a much shorter video on the Conjuration of the 72, which basically allows you to divide yourself out by the 72-fold names of God and recall and recapitulate all 72 forms of your personality back into unity, so that way you exist as the same energy as the singularity. You conjure specifically the 72 states in one state. So instead of having to use like the Goetic book of separation, right? You've got all the different jinn, all the different demons of whatever you want to call it, right? You can take on and divide your own soul. You can take on the energy of that capacity yourself. So when you're working with those energy states, you become that emanation. And so this allows you to do that. So that'll be in another video, so stay tuned. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope that this is food for thought when you're cultivating the relationship between you and the spirits, between you and the pathway between the dimensional states, because it's all connected to who you are and what it is you are doing. So when you start opening up the gates and you start cultivating the relationship of those gates, you're opening up the dimensional possibilities of what is, what could be, and what should be, versus what is and what will not be, right? It's all based on your decisions when you start interacting with those greater questions, when you start thinking about the higher applications of dimensional overlay into your actions. Is I'm going to conjure up this intangible spirit and apply it to my life over here, so that way that my life's trajectory goes in a different direction away from that spirit towards something else. So that way there is a path of flow. There is a reason why you have invited that energy into your life and created a dimensional shift, so that allows you to basically jump dimensional lines, so you're no longer on this trajectory of fate, you're on this one over here. And so that way your entrainment, your spirits, your developmental process creates something in others, or creates something in your life, or creates something in your future life, and all of these things. That is an extension of the dimensional thought which you had, because you were calling on a higher form of yourself, or a future form of yourself, or a past form of yourself, in order to be able to get you the resources that you need in order to move forward. Okay? Hopefully that's not too terribly confusing for you. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I will chat with you all later, my friend.